All right. Good evening, New York. Good evening, NAACP family. It is so good to be with you today on what will be an interesting conversation. We've got a lot happening on the federal level, of course, today, and for those following federal news or the activities of the Supreme Court or even the NAACP Instagram social media pages, you've seen quite a bit of posting around this decision from Calais. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about it. We're going to talk to some experts and to our legislative champions who have continued to carry in this moment and try to find a way forward to ensure that New Yorkers, particularly Black New Yorkers, New Yorkers of color, continue to have adequate representation at the state and local levels. So we'll talk a bit about the updates, but we'll of course start with the grounding of where we are right here in New York. My name is Chris Alexander once again, and I am the executive director of the NAACP New York State Conference. It is an honor, as always, to be with you. The work has been pretty hectic here in New York. We are deep in budget session and budget season. I say budget session because it does seem as if this will take the entirety of session before we finish the state budget this year. But as those conversations continue to move forward, we continue to be active, pushing and advancing our legislative priorities. But we can't ignore what's going on in the rest of the world. It's difficult to do that at a moment such as this when there is so much chaos, there is so much confusion. We are still actively at war with Iran, and we're seeing prices continue to go up. These concerns are always going to be impacting New Yorkers, particularly the most vulnerable, and they remain priorities of issues that we all should be paying attention to. But there's more happening, not just in pushing back against aggressive, dehumanizing immigration enforcement. There's more happening. We're seeing kind of the foundations of our democracy start to be eroded, and there's great concern about what happens tomorrow. We saw today in this most recent decision a continuation of really an ongoing effort for the last several months and really several decades, honestly, if we're talking about the Supreme Court's trajectory on this issue, of efforts to wade away voting right protections. Now, the Voting Rights Act is central to that conversation, and we'll have a deep dive into that, what the impact is of the decision today. We'll also talk about some of our local priorities in the state and how we're advancing efforts to protect and secure voting rights right here in New York. It is not without some level of difficulty that we have to play a defense on the state and local, on the federal and state levels. It is complicated. These issues don't always rise to the level of attention that they need to. But I think it remains our responsibility to drive these conversations. And so we're going to start tonight with one of our champions, someone who has continuously stood up for not just the work of the state conference and in alignment. She's a member, she's a leader, but also for the people of Brooklyn, but also for all New Yorkers who, oftentimes have been harmed by our justice system, are looking for ways to show and to see progress in how they're treated by their government. And so, Latrice, if you're with us, we'd love to pull you on now. There we
I
go.
am with you. We are. I apologize for my background, but fresh out of Albany, and still in total disbelief about what is happening here in our country. But of course, it's no surprise. But thank you so much, Chris, for having me and to the New York State Conference of the NAACP, to which I am a proud member.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the election law committee chair.
And the election law committee chair,
So,
exactly. And so I'm the gatekeeper,
yeah.
quite frankly, when I see bills from my colleagues on the other side that are doing things like trying to introduce voter ID bills and other items in order to effectuate discrimination. I'm
It's all
sorry,
good.
that
It's all good.
cinnamon. I
Listen,
told you we were in the car, but
we're
we're
in the
doing
car.
we're doing what we got to do.
The work continues. It is absolutely understood. I want to start first with a check in. How are you? How are you feeling? I know budget's ongoing. I know it's been a long fight, but how are you doing?
Well, there's still a few items which are holding up the budget, of course. Issues regarding immigration. One of the things that we're looking at right now is whether or not we are going to uh, enforce a mandate that would not allow the state's collaboration with ICE in civil court matters. But there's still a push in order to have them coordinate in criminal matters. And so, of course, as a staunch advocate with respect to criminal justice reform, we should keep ICE both out of civil and criminal courts. We want people to subject themselves to the jurisdiction of the state of New York without fear of retribution for their decisions in order to do so. We don't want people to hide in the shadows. And so we're, pushing right along as it relates to that and standing up on behalf of New Yorkers. Then there's, issues with respect to environmental justice, circumstances, and of course, as relates to auto insurance. And so until we get to a point where there's an agreement with the Senate, the Assembly, and the governor's office, we'll continue, our negotiations.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm hopeful that we've obviously, as a state conference, endorsed New York for All. We've talked about that legislation here, and really the position that we've held that we shouldn't be doing the work of the federal government, especially when this federal government is out of control. So I do hope that we get some resolution there, and we'll continue to push for that. We did want to talk to you today just about the decision, but it's not just the Supreme Court decision in Calais. We also saw Florida already advance through its House redistricting map that would eliminate, I believe, 3 or 4 seats as well, and change those districts over. I think there's also, more conversation across some southern states to also take these steps. I just want to kind of get a grounding and understanding from you. Um, uh, you know, what do we think happened today? What do we think the consequence is? I know this is a gutting of Section 2, which specifically relates to the ability of individuals to challenge maps or other policies that relate or that restrict their access based on their race. How can you kind of break that down for the public so that we can understand exactly what's happening here?
Okay, so, and as I'm still sort of figuring out
We're all
sort of
going
how I'm
through it.
even going to
Yeah.
digest all of this, because it's just so much, so fast, so furious. But the best way to be able to understand it is that when we lost Section 5,
Mhm.
it was sort of the kind of prophylactic kind of approach to voting rights. So before any harm took place, if there was a change to maps or to voting, which could possibly have a discriminatory effect based on race, we could request pre-clearance
Mhm.
from the Department of Justice. And all the while, after the Shelby case, we were in dismay, knew that it was something that we needed to do. And of course, we in New York State passed the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act in the state of New York.
That you sponsored.
Yes, right. It wasn't easy, but we did it.
Yeah.
And then also there's a John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act in the federal government, which is at a stalemate at this moment.
Mhm.
So we always felt that we had Section 2, right? Section 2 was a formula based protection, which happens after the harm had already occurred. So basically, the standard was you looked at the map and you decided whether or not this map or this new rule resulted in less power for voters of color. You
Mhm.
didn't have to prove racism and you did not have to prove intent. Under this new case now, it effectively rewrote the standard and said that you must prove intentional racial discrimination, not just harmful impact. You cannot rely on race based comparisons to show harm. And the state can, of course, always justify maps as political, even if the racial impact is obvious and clear to anyone. And so
Mhm.
we moved from a results test to an intent test.
Mhm.
So one was more about an inference, right? Like there's a circumstance in the law that says if if you're at a hotel and a mattress winds up, on the ground outside of a hotel window, you can infer that someone threw it out there. The mattress didn't just get up,
Yeah.
and the same is true as it relates to racial discrimination under the Voting Rights Act for our maps. When we're seeing that districts are being packed so that only certain communities are able to elect people of their choice who look like them, who share their values, are in certain particular communities, and then you see vote dilution happen because each of these little, let's say it was all a black community, are basically siphoned off into other districts, which ultimately result in the less amount of power that they have in order to affect the result of an election. We can see that this was done intentionally, and quite frankly, Kings County was one of those such districts because we at one point was a protected district under Section 5.
Mhm.
So now we have to prove that lawmakers intended to discriminate, which basically says that they would have to all out say that this is a race-based piece of legislation. And unless they say that, then you got to go through all of the loopholes. And quite frankly, we doubt that the law or a finding will come back that there was some sort of race-based discrimination. So Section 2 was gutted. It'll make it almost impossible to win cases regarding vote dilution. And it allows for racial gerrymandering to be rebranded as a political strategy. And so this is going to hurt Black New Yorkers. And we're going to do everything that we can in order to ensure that the values and the sentiments that we propose in the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act will still be upheld. It went to court on many different levels. Our amazing New York State Attorney General defended it vociferously, and to this day, it still holds true as law.
Yeah. And I want to just go back 1 second just to the intent versus impact. And I know, for the non attorneys, it might not always seem that that is a huge leap or huge change. But it is essentially the change of saying that somebody accidentally hit you by a car versus they meant to hit you by a car. I think identifying that intent is going to continue to be a really challenging a challenging guard or guardrail threshold for states or black voters in states that are seeing this type of change take hold. You said we have our Voting Rights Act here in New York, but I know that part of the impact here is definitely going to be a lack of black and brown representation on the federal level as well. Um, I'm concerned about what this means for future policy change on the federal level. We've got the SAVE Act kind of sitting, not being able to move through the Senate on the federal level, but on the House, it's already passed through the House, and we see voter ID laws and other types of really harmful policies being proposed and advanced there. Uh, is there comfort, I guess, in knowing that we still here in the state have the Voting Rights Act in place, and is there comfort in finding ways to challenge this decision or advance other legislative proposals on the federal level to address this?
Well, I will say that the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act has not made its way to the Supreme Court at this moment. But the Court of Appeals, which is the highest court in the state of New York, has upheld it. There are clear standards in order to show improve vote dilution. And in addition to that, we have proactive protections, which includes pre-clearance. And so if there's any um, uh, potential changes to maps, to voter processes, change in poll sites, etc., that takes place in the state of New York. A complaint can be filed with the New York State Attorney General's office, and her office can review these items. and decide whether or not they will have a discriminatory impact or any disparate impact, which will affect certain communities. And we've seen the law stand up in cases all across the state of New York. And we will continue to bring those cases and support them as well. I participated in amicus briefs in order to uphold the law or explain the legislative intent. Like a lot of times, is I know you says not everyone is lawyers, but what happens is they teach us in the law that there's the law, and then you could always look to the legislative intent of a law in order to show what the drafters were attempting to achieve. There are a couple of ways that you can do that. One is you can go to the debates which happen on the floor. So debating a bill is extremely important. So if you have an opportunity to ever catch any of our debates, you should definitely tune in, because quite frankly, that becomes a part of the record. And then there are blue jackets as well on all bills which gets finalized. So if you send up any opposition to a bill, those opposition notes will be attached to an actual law which gets passed to be able to show all of the different thoughts on both sides as it relates to sort of how people are receiving the bill. And so many and all of those things still ring true as it relates to the Voting Rights Act. And so we will continue to enforce it. But one of the things that we can do as New Yorkers, vis-a-vis the federal government, is to say, you know what, you don't have to act. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a state by state analysis and strategy for this approach to be able to get what we need. One of my favorite books is How to Make Friends and Influence People. And it talks about how to get what you want by making other people think it was their idea all along.
Yeah.
And as long as each of the states stands up and introduce a voting rights act of their own, then we could send a strong message, quite frankly, a mandate to the federal government to be able to say that this is important to do and to do it now. And so I think we could look at those states, which perhaps like California and others, I believe California may have a version, but other states that we may be able to introduce similar legislation, and then, quite frankly, just handle it on a state by state basis. We have had conversations with a number of national organizations to be able to say, here's some of the draft language that you can propose. We're working with the Brennan Center, of course, working with the NAACP and other groups in order to affect that, ACLU and others.
We appreciate that. I was going to ask, how you want folks to jump in and get involved, but I think you definitely just laid it out for us for the broader strategy. But for the individual level, I mean, of course, we're calling for folks to join the fight, become members, etc. But what makes clear is that we've got some protections on the state level against this activity. Still, some vulnerabilities on the federal level. We got to do some organizing to catch up here. Is there any other thing that, I guess in this process, or as folks are trying to talk about or explain what the removal of both the pre-clearance requirement in Section 5 and now the heightening of the standard of review from Section 2, anything else that you'd want to see kind of everyday folks that are watching, like how do they learn more? How do they get more engaged in this fight? We can also just say
Um,
just join the NAACP, become a
Well,
member.
I will definitely say to join the
Yeah,
NAACP. Quite frankly, I think that that's one of the it's a baseline at this point. It's not even a request,
yeah,
right? This is straight up about our survival. We are in survival mode. Like some we were having this conversation this evening about whether or not our people are ready. And I was like, absolutely we're ready. We have been here before. We have seen this before. We've always knew that it has taken us 400 plus years to get here, but any of those rights will take us an eternity for us to protect. And we stand at the as a lot of young people like to say, we on site. And
yeah.
so we just gonna show up and do what we gotta do, whether or not, there are the attorneys who are working in the background, the judges who are sitting in jurisdiction, legislators, community leaders, community activists. Quite frankly, everybody just got to do what they do. A lot of times, I love it when people say to me in election time, let me know what I got to do. Do what you know how to do. Like, I can't tell you what to do. It's so much going on. But whatever it is that you can do, we have our cell phones, document everything. Because quite frankly, they're not hiding anymore. They're
Yeah,
not hiding behind language. They don't have a problem with using the N word. They don't have a problem with talking about black people or whomever, wherever you're from, whether it's an immigration conversation. They don't have a problem with talking about language discrimination. And so, whenever it is that you are hearing, um, the words, quite frankly, come out of their mouths or on paper or social media, continue to send those items over to the NAACP, to our New York State Attorney General's office, so that we can have the appropriate paper trail that we need in order to stand up whenever the ugliness of racism show its head.
absolutely. Absolutely. I could not have said it better myself. Assembly Member Latrice Walker, we are so thankful for your leadership. We're going to talk a little later about democracy during attention, a bill that you also carry, just to continue to always make it clear that the fight is both in DC and here in Albany as well. So we want to thank you always for taking the time out and for the work that you continue to do.
Well, you know what else I wanted? I'm going to make one last note because this just
Yeah.
happened today.
Yeah.
So there's a bill right now that folk are have introduced that made it that wants to make it a misdemeanor or a criminal a crime in order to harass a poll worker. I haven't really gotten into the bill that much because again it just crossed my desk today. And so the first thing that hit me was poll workers, poll watchers,
Hmm.
right? So now if a poll watcher shows up at a poll site and they're demanding things that quite frankly are within their rights to demand as it relates to watching at a poll site, what would it take for a poll worker to call 911, and usually they're police officers on site, to
Hmm.
go over to one of these police officers, make a claim that this person is harassing them, may have touched them, pick up a pen, whatever, push them, whether this happened or not, and now people get criminal records protecting the franchise. And
Hmm.
so not only are they making it more difficult for us in civil court, now they want to stand up and make it a crime for us to be able to do the things that are necessary in order for us to get the rights that we deserve as Americans, quite frankly. Now, I already know you already heard the last Supreme Court case just relitigate the circumstances around citizenship
Hmm.
and Dred Scott, right? That was a conversation about immigration, but to me, I heard slavery more times than I cared to be comfortable with.
Yeah.
I heard Dred Scott more times than I ever thought I would hear in this day and age. And quite frankly, I heard the fact that black people were not citizens. Well, no matter where you were born, whether you were born in the 50 states or not, or your family members in generations and you came here as a chattel slave.
Yeah.
And so I think that we have so much that we need to stand up for. We have this court is really just allowing us to exercise our muscles that we know that we already have. And so it's time for us to tap into that muscle memory. God bless you, Chris, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Latrice. Always good to see you, and please keep doing the good work. Thank you. That was a quick cutoff. Apologies there. I mean, as you saw and hear from the assembly member, there's a lot going on, and I can't say that enough. I can't, it is difficult to highlight these issues of mass concern that require mobilization and an appropriate response. But we are waving the flag right now. We are screaming that there is a problem, right? And she was, of course, talking about the birthright citizenship case as we transition from today's Supreme Court decision in Calais. But I just, we want to be clear that there's a problem right now. And so, somebody who was continuing to do the work locally, organizing, every time we do these lives, we like to bring in advocates that we work in coalition with, because it's important to elevate the voices of the experts, of those who are closest to the issue, closest to the work. Karen, can you hop on with us real quick? Um, the work that Karen Warren has done. She's traveling, still making time to talk to us today. We want to thank you, and I want to continue the conversation we just started with Latrice. We've just seen a movement of the standard of review. We have seen really a heightening of that standard in a way that will prevent or preclude a lot of people who are either having their community's voting power reduced, either through dilution or some level of gerrymandering that splits up a black community, for example. We've seen a weakening of that standard of review. Can you give us some of your analysis of what's happened here? I know Latrice is deep in budget conversations, but she did a great job of kind of breaking this down in simple language for folks to really understand it. But as an expert, I'd love to hear your take as well.
Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much, Chris, for all of the good work that you and the NAACP do on a daily basis, protecting our rights here in New York. And of course, it's a hard act to follow, Assemblywoman Walker. I mean, she really has been doing a phenomenal job in the Assembly. You mentioned her role in the VRA, the NYVRA. And I mean, we could spend all night talking about her contributions. So it's really an honor to follow her, I guess, to be in her virtual presence, so to speak.
Of course.
What does this mean? It is the decision today was really, it's not particularly surprising.
Yeah.
This Supreme Court or this nation, they've been moving into what I consider to be a third Reconstruction period. And so decision after decision basically just reinforce that. So what this means, and we've been feeling the effects of their undoing of our rights for a while now. Yeah. We're talking about Calais, and I know the NAACP was a little bit involved, or plenty involved, in the recent case in Staten Island, where the lines that have been drawn for Staten Island residents may make it possible that basically they were drawn long time ago when the population, the demographics was a little bit different. So there are a lot more people of color on Staten Island, but there is this voter dilution that Assemblywoman Walker alluded to earlier. And so we sued, right? Folks sued to have those lines redrawn so that people of color would have a greater say in who their electeds are. This Supreme Court, well, as you know, the local courts basically ruled in favor.
Yep.
But the Supreme Court of the United States, I suppose in anticipation of Calais, just basically, stayed the decision, and here we are with the old lines, which in many ways disenfranchise people of color. So this is here. Yeah. This is not academic. This is not something that is happening in Louisiana. And the concern that we have is that not just in the South, but across the nation, we will begin to see even further erosion of our voices, or diminishing of our voices, or voices of the poll. And that has far-reaching ramifications. So I'm concerned that we're going to have such prejudicial lines, district lines drawn, that it's not just going to impact us at the congressional level, but all the way down to the school board, where we'll no longer have a strong voice. So I'm concerned, but I think that there are opportunities for us as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to go to the opportunities. I often live in the optimism because I think it's the only place to really, impact or affect change. But before we transition to that, I want to hear another note from you that we've talked about a little bit about, understanding that the work of protecting voter rights is one that's ongoing. It's continued, right? We start from really, as Latrice brought up, post slavery. We get folks the right to vote. We have enfranchisement. We keep fighting, fighting, fighting because it's not realized. We get this Voting Rights Act as a vehicle to address this prior discrimination, this record of poll taxes, literacy tests, all these things, these barriers to us exercising that right to vote, which means lack of representation. We would always not be able then to be engaged in decision making around those decisions that impact our communities closest. You have been on the front lines for a long time here in New York, working to make sure that the rights here in New York are protected. But I just wanted to, because we've talked about this in the past, and it's really about the way that the lack of representation impacts our everyday lives, right? And I think it's important to translate to folks that these decisions, again, Calais is a case, and I didn't give the proper context as we started, so my bad. But Calais is a case. It's in Louisiana. It's about a redistricting effort they put in place, or a remedy to a gerrymander they put in place in Louisiana that allowed them to use racial lines. So
Mhm.
Black communities have Black representation, right? Something that we've seen over the years. The throwing that out, what does this like? Give me a breakdown a little bit more about how this impacts the everyday New Yorker, and really just anybody who's tuning in that might not even be living in this state.
Great question, Chris. So I look at voting as a means to an end in some ways. So I vote because I, and I vote for certain people, my representatives, because ultimately it's about the resources that my community receives. So when, so am I still on? Okay, great. Because my
Yeah,
internet is a little shaky, right?
you're good. You're with us.
So yeah, great, good. So basically, if we are unable to elect people who have our community's interest at heart, right, we will see even more disinvestment from our communities. Why are our schools not as great as in some neighborhoods? Why is it that our streets are often the last ones that have the pothole filled, right? Why is it that we don't have the resources that we need to be successful? And the way to remedy that is by electing people who will represent us when at those tables. The assembly member talked about the budget. So the people of East New York are really fortunate to have her be their representative at that table to ensure that East New York gets a fair shake. East New York still ain't getting what East New York ought to have.
Yeah.
However, imagine, because there are all these obstacles that are put in Assembly Walker's way, and not just Assembly Walker, but it's a structural issue, right? And she's fighting against a structural issue. If we have someone who doesn't care about East New York, is not interested, right? Is not from there, doesn't know anything, what are the chances that they'll get those schools?
Yeah.
Right? Get the hospital, get the fire stations, get the resources that the people in the area need. So I think we need to see voting as just a way of, because it is, of registering what it is that we want from and for our communities.
And I appreciate that. And you've done that. We've done for the audience. We've done a couple of events together over the years. So there's always a way that Karen can break down the responsibility that we all have to participate. So I was just trying to pull that out. And we are now still fighting, right, to protect voting rights for New Yorkers. I want to just before we kind of transition, I want to hear a little bit more about the work that you're doing, some of the priorities that you all have as Citizen Action. You also lead the BIPOC table as well around voting rights and voting access. Just
Mhm.
before, so that folks can understand, there's a lot of fights happening around voting rights and making sure that we have the ability to participate.
Yes. So you're right. There are like so many fights, right? We could be here all night talking about some of these bills. Some of the priorities, though, that we are really throwing down on this session, and include democracy during detention, so that people who are detained pre-trial, so you're arrested for a misdemeanor or even felony offense, but you haven't been convicted. Maybe you're just waiting to your folks to gather money to so that you can get bail.
Yeah.
But it's election season. Your right to vote is still valid. You still have a legal right. So we're saying, folks, it's not okay to just issue people's rights to vote. They need to have access to the ballot.
Absolutely.
So that's something we're working really hard on. Another thing that Citizen Action and the BIPOC table is working on as well is the Democracy Preservation Act. The reason why we have Cali today and so many of these other harmful decisions is because of big money in politics. There are some billionaires, and we can name names, right? There are some billionaires who have been working not just this year, not just last year, but decades, right? They have corporations, multinational corporations, and they've been working decades to make this nation one that works solely for the moneyed class. And so we have a democracy during detention bill that begins to address that in some ways by limiting multinational corporations that are foreign influence from being able to pour money into our state and local elections. So those are two. We also need same-day registration. Same-day registration is in about 22
We're,
states
we're,
nation.
we're getting closer, right? We have moved up registration windows. We have Golden Day now. We've got something close to it, but not enough, right?
Right. We have us the first day of early voting. Anyone can walk into the poll site and register to vote
Hmm.
and vote at the same time that same day. But it's only one day.
Yeah.
It works. It works very well. But we need a constitutional amendment to extend that period for the duration of voting from
Yeah.
the first day of early voting to election day. So we're working on that as well. And there are some other bills. I don't know how much time you
No,
have,
no,
Chris.
that's well. I guess the next question is just for folks who want to plug in to the work that you're doing.
Mhm.
What's some a word of advice, instruction that you have for folks? We want to make sure that we're always using these moments to take the energy in the room and
Mhm.
put people to work. So, what do you have? What's the best way for folks to get involved?
Well, they can sign up to be grassroots members of the BIPOC table. You can go to bit.ly/join BIPOC table and just fill out a form. We'll get in touch with you. Or you can go to Citizen Action. Their website is citizenactionny.org and sign up to be a member, grassroots member there. Of course, I'm a member of the NAACP,
Absolutely.
a proud member. So folks can start with the NAACP as well. And the NAACP is a member of the BIPOC table. So we're all working hand in glove to ensure that people's rights are not only protected, but expanded.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Karen. Always great to hear from you. And it's been always an honor to work with you as well on some of these issues. And I know that it's your passion, but it's something that our community really needs and appreciates. So always thank you.
Thank you so much. You know, before I go, I forgot one little itty
Sure.
bitty since we're talking about all of this gerrymandering. The other thing I'm working on is there is a bill in the Senate, well, in Albany, both the Senate and the Assembly, to basically address, right, this gerrymandering that we're having nationwide, right? To provide an answer to it locally in New York, and this is something that we're working on. And New Yorkers need to, when they speak with their representatives, they definitely should say, "Hey, you need to do something about this, crazy gerrymandering that is happening throughout the nation. We need to do some redistricting here."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so thank
It's.
you.
I imagine we'll be talking about that quite a bit as we move forward these next couple of months. So thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you. Have a great one.
All right, you as well. All right, so that was Karen Wharton, and again, the through line is very clear. The What is happening right now, this attack on voting rights, from the Save Act to the redistricting effort that we've now seen in Texas, Florida, other states. We've seen an effort to restrict and reduce Black voting power in the country. I think this is happening at a federal level, on a federal level, but we also just heard that there still continues to be some issues here in New York that we've got to advance in order to properly secure that right to vote for all New Yorkers who are eligible. I want to pull in our next speaker, Cleanna, who is just an amazing organizer and friend, and has been leading the effort around the Democracy During Detention Act that you heard both mentioned while Latrice was on, but also while Karen was on. We all worked together on the bill, just for everybody to know. But Cleanna's the lead organizer, and she's been incredible to work with on this. Cleanna, welcome.
Thank you
Always
so
check it
much.
in. Yeah, always check it in. How you doing?
Ah, gosh, I've been streaming Sailor Moon ever since hearing about this ruling today. I just needed some whimsy and joy and color and hope in my life. I'm disappointed but not surprised, really. Yeah.
And
How
that's
are
been the
you?
energy. I know that's been the energy from folks because we've been heading this direction, but it's something that I think people need to grapple with and understand what it means to have an inability to challenge, gerrymandering on a federal level because of
Yeah,
race. I think people had to understand, like, all these things that we're watching happen on the federal level that we're concerned about or have questions about, and how does this happen, and why doesn't Congress do this? Why doesn't Congress do that? It comes
yeah,
from this. This is how it happens. This is how we end up unable to pull back from a war. This is how we end up with Medicaid and
absolutely.
Medicare cuts. This is how we get here.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so I want to talk to you mostly about the state effort, but of course, any other reactions to today's decision.
It's just you can brace yourself for the fall, but the fall will always be a shock. And I think, again, that's where I am right now. I think, I worry that this is the first of many dominoes that are going to fall. But that is what really helps me like focus and stay on my goal of passing the Democracy During Detention Act, which I know we're going to talk about in like a microsecond. But, it kind of just reminds me of why I'm doing the work that I do.
Yeah, reminding people of their power. I think
Yes, absolutely.
and you've done an incredible job of that, leading this campaign,
Thank
where
you.
we're in the rooms together, we're in the fights together, but to know that for folks who are currently in jail or prison, New York is ahead. We've got
Yeah,
our Lewis Voting Rights Act. We have our state companion of that federal bill that has just been voted down.
absolutely.
We have that state companion to protect voting rights here in New York. It's also woven into our Constitution, but still, we've got folks who are eligible to vote that can't, simply because the state has custody of them.
Yes.
Now, this is an issue that I think folks don't always appreciate, is what it is. But even in a state like New York, we still have voter suppression happening. And I want you to lay out, the bill, talk to us about what it does. Karen touched on it a little bit, and of course, Latrice carries it. But give us
Yes. Yes.
the skinny of it.
And again, thank you so much for having me today. Thank you for letting me be in the room with people like Latrice, Assemblymember Walker, and Karen. Those are really big. Those are just giants, dynamos, and it's such an honor to be, following in their footsteps and really doing this work and really taking a lot of the lead from them. So, even in this bill, like you said, Assemblymember Walker leads it, and it's because of thousands of New Yorkers are legally eligible to vote in jail, but they've not lost that right, but most of them can't use that. And we like to think it's because of an oversight. There's no consistent system to get them registered, educated, or ballots in hand. And so that's really why we're pushing the Democracy During Detention Act right now. It does three main things: DDDA, which we lovingly call it. It puts the Board of Elections in charge of delivering voter access in jails. It creates a standardized statewide process, so that access isn't random or volunteer dependent. And it uses the tools that we already trust and that we're already using in other congregate spaces like nursing homes. And that would be in-person ballot teams and polling sites, and it applies those things to jails. It really is saying, hey, you missed a spot. Let's use this formula or use this process we've got over here and put it in this space too.
Mhm.
Because right now, access really just depends on luck. And this bill would really give infrastructure to voting in jails right now.
Yeah, and it is one of those things. And you mentioned the point about the volunteer taking up that space. Right now, we've got voting programs in Rikers,
Yep.
largely led by volunteers like Karen,
Yes.
who
Yes.
has to go into this jail in the city here in Rikers to register voters, to deliver education so that they can understand that they can participate in the process despite being held currently behind bars as they await trial. But we've kind of rested our laurels on the fact that it's happening, and without kind of a true kind of appreciation for the fact that this is a role that the state should be in. This is something
Yes.
that the state
Yes.
should be doing, and not something that volunteers have to fill the capacity. Again, along the same lines of making sure that people can participate in this process. Um,
Absolutely.
uh, we have had, and I'm just going on my little spiel real quick because this
Do
is,
it.
I've worked previous campaigns before I transitioned to advocacy. I was running political campaigns. 648 votes separated a win and a loss, and we've
Yeah.
got thousands of people in local jails across the state that could determine swing elections one way or another, and still we've allowed that voting group that would be active to fall by the wayside. I want to hear about what's the political pushback on this? What's the political pushback of trying to make sure that the state isn't standing in the way of people voting?
Sure. So clearing the Senate Elections Committee was a major step. Right
Congratulations
now,
on
sorry, say again.
that. Congratulations on that. That was a big
Oh,
deal.
thank you. Yes, yes, we passed Senate Elections Committee last week. So excited. Now we've got another committee to go through before it gets on the floor. So we're excited about this progress. So right now, the pushback that we're hearing is we don't have the manpower for it, or you know it's like, oh well, they can vote, they just need to know how to ask. We don't have enough people to do this, that kind of thing. Um and really, it's just, at the end of the day, this is a right that eligible citizens in jails across New York State have.
Mhm.
And we are silencing people who could be speaking out for their communities, who still can have an impact in the communities that they are removed from,
Mhm.
whether it be a year, whether it be a few months, whatever it is. This is an opportunity for them, even though they cannot, bring um, a paycheck into the household or pick the kids up from school, or bring the groceries home or any of that. They can still impact their households and their communities by you know going, while they're in jails, like getting that civic education, being able to apply, or excuse me, fill out an application for a registration and ballot and everything. And, we're just not, we're really doing a disservice. I mean, right now we are at such a, it's such an important moment when it comes to federal and state voting and democracy and elections. And New York State is fighting to defend the right to vote, and I'm so grateful that we've got additional cover to make sure that we keep this equity in our elections and voting. But we also need to fortify that. We also need to make sure that every eligible voter has access to the ballot. What they do with that is up to them. We need to ensure that everyone who can vote knows they can vote, knows how to vote, and can vote if they choose to. That is so important right now. And to be honest, when we talk to people, we don't get a lot of pushback. A lot of them say, this makes sense, especially because it's an administrative oversight.
Yeah.
It's not that this was done, intentionally. It's just the BOE does elections, the jails, they take care of people who are detained, and a lot of times dates and times pass and folks in jails just don't think of this. But when we have outreach, when we're able to go into those jails and talk to folks, you can see the dots connecting for them, and them realizing what an impact voting really has. And I know that a lot of our communities feel like there's just no point, I'm not going to be heard anyway. But like you said, I mean, you're saying 600 votes, I've heard about 6 votes.
Yeah.
I've heard about elections, the fate of an election going under 6 votes, and that is just incredible to me. So being able to bring democracy to every corner of New York State is just so important. And as we see what the federal government is doing to really weaken elections as much as they can, I'm so proud to be in New York State and work with folks like you and folks like Karen and Assemblymember Walker, who are 10 toes down for democracy.
Yeah, we appreciate you, Cleanna, and I want to just end with this because this is one of those bills that's now moving. This is a broader conversation about voting rights being under attack, and again, there's federal concerns, state issues. We are moving this bill, though. This bill is moving through the Senate right now. It's not moved before, right? And that means that the advocacy work is working. We want to continue to push our electeds to understand this concern, to elevate this issue. Give us some instruction that we can give to the people about how to get engaged, how to reach out and work with you to get this bill passed. Oh, you went on mute. Can't hear you.
Gotcha. Well, one thing I did while I was listening to all of these conversations is that I became an NAACP member. I became a citizen action member. I was already a member of the League of Women Voters, but, really become a member of one or all 3 of these incredible organizations who have been doing the work and continue to do the work. I think it's just, when we get together, it's like, it's like a megazord, it's like all the Power Rangers get together and, we really create this indomitable force for campaigns that are absolutely winnable because they are campaigns for the people. So join your local NAACP, League of Women Voters, or Citizen Action chapter. We have to call and email your senators, your assembly members, especially members on the Crime Victims Committee. That's where the bill is going next. Ask directly for co-sponsorship and movement to the floor. And keep it simple. This is about making sure that eligible voters can vote. Third, it's a statewide issue. I know it's crazy to do, but call your local jail and find out what they're doing about in-jail voting programs. I can tell you, absolutely tell you, every board of elections in New York State knows about this bill, and every sheriff knows about this bill. We made sure that there was someone to present on a statewide sheriff's call to talk about this bill. Folks had the opportunity, sheriffs had the opportunity to ask questions, so they cannot pretend like they don't know about this. Call them and ask them, how do you feel about this? What does voting in jails look like for you? And are you willing to reach out to our legislators and tell them, hey, this is important for the people who are behind bars. We need to get this to them.
We thank you so much, and I want
Thank
to, of course,
you.
shout out Ulster County and my forever board member Jen Metzger and the work that they do there, where they have operationalized a voting in jails program, making sure that everybody being held in local jail in Ulster County is still able to vote and exercise that right. So I want to thank you, Cleanna, for your work as always. Partnership, really, it's you have to understand it. There's not a lot of people who are running around the state, running statewide campaigns, trying to draw attention and starting to rack up some wins. So we're looking forward to the work ahead, and honored to be in this with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
All right. So you just heard from a few folks, and I want to apologize, of course, to the audience because I jumped straight in because we're tight on time. I'm getting used to this thing, but there's a lot going on. And I know that it's hard to keep straight of it all. What you heard from Assembly Member Latrice Walker is what the impact of today's decision in Calais has and will have on voting rights in the future. The shifting, the elevation of that standard of review, the requirement that voters have to show discriminatory intent as opposed to impact is a significant shift. But what we do and still have in front of us is a fight. And, we're not running from that. The Supreme Court did pull the rug out from under our feet today. And it is difficult to see a path forward, but it's not gone. Karen Wharton has shown us the work and the fact that this is not just a Southern problem. This is not something that only exists in certain communities. The impact of a closing of access to the voting booth is something that's going to impact all of us. Whether we're concerned about environmental issues, about criminal justice reform, all of these things change. Our ability to influence these things change when we have less seats at the table. There are a lot of fights ahead. There are ballot fights, voter suppression efforts. You're going to continue to hear about what's going on in some of these other states and the steps that they are taking to either dilute or in some way weaken Black voting power. Yesterday, just down the street at DC 37's headquarters, shout out to DC 37, we launched Black New York Forward. It's our multi-year statewide campaign to build, organize, and exercise our collective power across the states. It's our organizing blueprint to make sure that Black communities and the institutions that support them are actually having a seat at the table in shaping the public policy that decides what happens to our communities. That's the path forward. And you'll hear a lot more about that in the coming weeks and months. But what you do also need to know is that through Black New York Forward, we're driving up membership, we're strengthening branches, and we're helping local communities ensure that the concerns of their residents are being heard, that local issues are not going without being addressed, and that we are taking the fight wherever it may be, where there's discrimination or an effort to suppress the voting power of others. If you're watching tonight, you're not already a member of your local NAACP branch. You heard from all of our speakers how important it is for you to join. You've got an assignment now. Go to NYSNAACP.org. Find your branch, join, show up to the next meeting, bring a friend. That's how we build the muscle. That's how we get into the fight and, frankly, bring our own table our own seat to the table and potentially our own table to the room if folks continue to try to take away our voice. While we're doing this work here at home, there's parallel fights happening in Washington that we just can't ignore. It's the SAVE Act requiring, citizenship or proof of citizenship for registration. It's this redistricting fight that continues to water down the power, the voting power for Black Americans. But it's also the efforts taken to confuse, the efforts taken to distract, the efforts taken to make sure that you are not asking the questions or getting engaged in the process. We're here to help close that gap. We're here to help explain. We're here to help translate not just the ongoings and the policy debates, but also translate your frustration, your concern about the future into action and into measurable change. Today, we lost ground at the Supreme Court, but we do have a choice about what happens tomorrow. I'm asking you to join us in the fight, join your local branch, sign on to support the Black New York Forward campaign, call your senator, your local representatives to support the Democracy During Detention Act. This is the type of activity that's necessary to make sure that we continue to move forward. And so on behalf of the NAACP New York State Conference, our leadership, and all of our branches across the state, I want to say thank you for joining us. We're going to continue to try to be a conduit for information and to make sure that everybody stays informed and prepared for the fights ahead. Looking forward to talking to you all again. Have a good night.